It was cold and snowy on the island of Sodor. The village children had built a snow engine. They were excited. The winter holidays were here. People were coming from far and wide to visit the island. But this year, there was even more snow. It had covered the island and blocked the roads. Bertie the bus couldn't take any passengers. So the Fat Controller came to Tidmouth Sheds.
Percy, you are to pull the passengers today,
the Fat Controller said. Percy was worried. He usually took the mail or shunted trucks. He hadn't pulled passengers for a long time.
Gordon will show you what to do,
said the Fat Controller, and he left.
I'm an express engine,
huffed Gordon.
I shouldn't be slowed down by a small engine like Percy.
Gordon went with Percy to the depot. But when Percy backed up to collect his carriages, he bumped them very hard.
No, 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 you need to puff smoothly,
Gordon huffed impatiently.
Watch me. You'll soon learn how to pull passengers.
Gordon backed smoothly up to his carriages and buffered up to them very gently. Very smooth, the yard manager said. Best buffering I've ever seen. Gordon was so proud he thought his boiler would burst.
Maybe teaching Percy will be fun,
Gordon said to himself.
Then he'll see I'm the biggest and the best.
Gordon pulled into Knapford Station. He rolled smoothly to a stop.
Perfect,
Gordon chuffed. Then Percy pulled into the station.
Look at all those passengers,
he gasped. He blew his whistle and wheeshed lots of steam.
You're doing it all wrong,
huffed Gordon.
Don't wheesh until your passengers are on board. Watch me.
Gordon waited. When all the passengers were on board, he wheeshed some steam. Gordon was very proud. He liked showing Percy that he was the best. Gordon was having lots of fun, but Percy wasn't. Percy was fed up. Gordon and Percy puffed across the island. Gordon puffed through the snowy valley. Percy puffed under the icy bridge. Later, Gordon and Percy were at another station. Their passengers were all on board. Percy wheeshed some steam.
You're learning a little bit,
groaned Gordon.
But you're still not doing it right. Watch me.
Gordon wheeshed some steam and pulled out of the station.
Big blue show off,
puffed Percy. Gordon wasn't listening. He was already puffing through the countryside.
I'm so clever,
Gordon chuffed.
There must be someone else I can show.
And there was.
Watch me,
Gordon chuffed as he raced past James.
I puff nice and smoothly.
Then he raced past Toby.
Watch me, I'm fastest and best.
Gordon puffed into the station. He was very excited. There were lots of people he could show off to.
Watch how smoothly I can go,
puffed Gordon. Gordon was so busy showing off, he didn't see how icy the track was. Gordon slid right through the station and into a siding. Everyone watched as he puffed into a big pile of snow.
Yuck,
coughed Gordon. Luckily, no one was hurt. The Fat Controller was very cross.
I asked you to teach Percy,
he said sternly,
not show off all afternoon.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, Gordon puffed quietly. Just then, Percy puffed past. He pulled smoothly into the station. All of Percy's passengers arrived safely at the platform. Gordon's passengers had to walk through the snow. Gordon was very embarrassed. His face was as red as Bertie the bus. But Edward soon pulled him out of the snowdrift. Later that evening, it was time to go home. The passengers were all aboard Gordon and Percy. Gordon wanted to show Percy how smoothly he could puff. But then he remembered sliding into the snowdrift. Gordon didn't want to look silly again.
Percy, you go first.
Gordon puffed.
Show me how smoothly you can go.
So Percy pulled smoothly out of the station, and Gordon followed. Gordon and Percy puffed through the snowy countryside, and Gordon didn't show off once. At last, Gordon and Percy arrived at Tidmouth Sheds.
Did you see how smoothly I puffed?
Asked Percy.
Yes,
Said Gordon.
you have learned very well. Percy was proud. But then again,
Gordon added.
I am a very good teacher.
It was a beautiful morning on the Island of Sodor, and it was Lady Hatt's birthday. She was having a special party. There were cakes and balloons and even a merry-go-round. But the most exciting of all was the brass band. It was coming from the mainland to play at the party. The Fat Controller came to Tidmouth Sheds.
Thomas, you are to collect the brass band.
Thank you, sir, said Thomas. James and Gordon were upset. They wanted to collect the brass band themselves. Thomas puffed happily across the island. And into Knapford Station. The brass band climbed aboard Thomas and he raced away. But Thomas was so excited, he pulled away too soon. The tuba player was left behind. Thomas steamed off to Maithwaite Station. And the brass band assembled on the platform. Suddenly, the band leader cried out. "Where is the tuba player?" he wailed. "We cannot play without him." No one knew where the tuba player was. "I'm sorry, sir," gasped Thomas. "I must have left him behind." Thomas raced back to Knapford Station, but the tuba player wasn't at Knapford Station. He was waiting for Bertie the bus. Bertie pulled up beside the tuba player. "Can you take me to the party?" he asked. "I'll take you as far as I can," said Bertie. Thomas arrived at Knapford Station and couldn't see the tuba player anywhere. "The tuba player is lost," moaned Thomas. "And it's all my fault." Thomas raced from station to station. Must find him, he puffed. Where could he be? Bertie had dropped the tuba player off. "Bye-bye," he called cheerfully. "Thank you," said the tuba player, and he waited for another ride. He didn't have to wait long. Elizabeth, the vintage lorry, pulled up.
I can take you as far as the flour mill, she boomed.
Thank you, said the tuba player. He climbed on to Elizabeth's wagon, and he practiced his tuba as they chuffed down the lane. Thomas puffed faster and faster. Where was the tuba player? Thomas flew right across the level crossing. He didn't see Elizabeth waiting there, or the tuba player on her flatbed, and he didn't hear the tuba playing. Where could the tuba player be? Thomas moaned. Elizabeth took the tuba player all the way to the mill.
There you are, young man, she puffed. Trevor will take you from here.
The tuba player thanked Elizabeth and climbed aboard Trevor. Trevor chugged slowly down the lane. Thomas kept on looking, but the island was very big, and the tuba player was very small. Thomas looked behind trucks and called into carriages. He raced along the main line, tooting all the way. Where was the tuba player? Thomas raced into the yard. Percy was coming the other way. Thomas bumped straight into Percy and the bunting flew up in the air. Percy's trucks came off the track, and so did Thomas.
You've spilt my bunting, moaned Percy. I'll never find the tuba player now, groaned Thomas.
Harvey arrived to clear the track for Thomas.
How did you get into this mess? He boomed. I was looking for the tuba player, moaned Thomas.
Look and listen, Harvey said thoughtfully. If he's a tuba player, he might be playing the tuba. So Thomas took his time, and he listened very carefully. Then he heard it, the sound of a tuba playing in the distance. Trevor was chugging down the lane. He was enjoying the tuba player's music. Thomas pulled up. He was pleased to see the tuba player. I've been looking for you everywhere, he puffed. With the tuba player safely on board, Thomas steamed off to Maithwaite as fast as he could. Thomas arrived at the party just in time. The band played beautifully. Lady Hatt was very happy. It was the best birthday party ever. It was summertime on the Island of Sodor. Gordon pulled the passenger express. It was very busy, but Gordon loved the hustle and bustle. Henry hauled trucks in the forest. He loved the peace and quiet, but he didn't see many people. Sometimes working in the forest could be very lonely. Later, Henry pulled into Knapford Station. He was delighted to see all the passengers. But Gordon was not delighted to see Henry. "Keep your smelly phrase away from my passengers," grumbled Gordon.
But it's only logs, chuffed Henry. Passengers and freight do not mix, huffed Gordon, and he wheeshed away. Henry watched the express leave the station. "I'd like to pull passengers," sighed Henry, "just for a change." Henry stopped at the water tank on the edge of the forest. Children were standing by one of the trees. "What are those children doing?" Henry asked Thomas. "That's the old Sodor wishing tree," said Thomas. "They must be making a wish." "A wishing tree!" gasped Henry. "How wonderful! Do you think it would make my wish come true?" asked Henry. "It might," said Thomas, and he puffed away. Henry rolled up to the wishing tree. He took a deep breath and made a wish as hard as he could. "I wish I could pull the express instead of Gordon," he said. That evening the Fat Controller came to see Henry. "Tomorrow you will pull the express," he said. "Thank you, sir," said Henry happily. His wish had come true. The next morning, Henry chuffed cheerfully into Knapford Station. When his passengers were on board, Henry blew his whistle and pulled out of the station. But Henry puffed too quickly. "Go gently," called his driver. "You can bump freight, but you can't bump passengers." "Sorry," puffed Henry. Henry puffed proudly through the countryside. "Pulling passengers is a grand job," he said. Gordon was in the repair yard. He was being fitted with a new boiler. But Gordon felt lonely. He was missing his passengers. The passengers were missing Gordon too. They were having the bounciest, bumpiest ride they had ever had. When Henry got back to the sheds, the Fat Controller was waiting for him. "There have been complaints," he said sternly. "Passengers are not like logs. You must be gentle." "Yes, sir," said Henry sadly. Being gentle was very difficult. Then Henry saw Gordon. He was looking miserable. "My wish has made Gordon go to the repair yard," gasped Henry. This made Henry feel very bad. The next day, Henry had to collect the buffet car. He tried his best to be gentle, but he shunted the buffet car so hard everything flew into the air. There were more complaints than ever. Henry didn't want to pull passengers anymore. He wanted to wish everything back to normal. But when he arrived at the forest, Henry couldn't remember which tree was the wishing tree. "Oh, no," cried Henry. "Which one could it be?" Henry didn't know. So he decided to wish on all the trees. "I wish I could pull freight again," he puffed. Then he moved to the next tree and he wished again. "I wish I could pull freight again." The Fat Controller arrived on board Thomas. "What are you doing, Henry?" asked the Fat Controller. "You are causing confusion and delay." Henry told him all about the wishing tree. "Wishing trees don't run railways," said the Fat Controller. "That's my job. Gordon just needed some repairs. He'll be back tomorrow."
Henry was delighted. The next day, Gordon came back to work. He looked as good as new. The passengers were so pleased to see him, they cheered and cheered and cheered. Gordon beamed happily for the rest of the day. Henry was happy to be back in the peace and quiet of the forest. At the end of the day, he stopped near the wishing tree. And even though the Fat Controller had told him trees don't run railways, Henry wished he would never have to pull passengers ever again, just in case. It was a baking hot summer on the island of Sodor. The sun was shining brightly. James and Toby were taking the children to the seaside. It was a wonderful job. All the engines liked seeing the children's happy faces, and they loved hearing them cheer when they saw the sea. Thomas wished he was taking the children to the seaside, but Thomas was taking a big tank of raspberry syrup to the ice cream factory. Down on the beach it was very hot, and the ice cream lady had run out of ice cream. So when Thomas arrived at the ice cream factory, the factory manager was waiting for him. "We have to make lots more ice cream," he cried. "You must go and get the cream, the chocolate, and the strawberries." Thomas was disappointed. He had lots to collect, and he wanted to take the children to the seaside. "If we get everything in time," said Thomas's driver, "we can still take some children." So Thomas rushed to the dairy. He collected the cream and he puffed quickly away. Next, Thomas had to collect some strawberries, so he raced through the countryside to Farmer McColl's. Then Thomas had to stop for James. "Out of the way!" snorted James. "Passenger train coming through!" James's carriages were full of laughing children. They were going to the seaside. "Why does James get to take the children?" moaned Thomas. At last the crossing was clear and Thomas puffed away. "If I'm quick, I can still take some of the children," he puffed. So Thomas raced as fast as he could. Soon Thomas arrived at Farmer McColl's. "Please, be quick," Thomas panted. The farm workers loaded his trucks. Before long they were filled with plump ripe strawberries. "Thank you," Thomas chuffed, and he raced away. Next, he had to go to the chocolate factory. Thomas hurried through the baking sun. "I've still got time to take some children to the seaside," he panted. Thomas puffed faster and faster. His wheels clattered and his pistons pumped. But he puffed so fast, the signalman didn't change the points in time. Thomas raced down the wrong track. "Bother!" cried Thomas. Thomas had to reverse slowly and carefully back to the point. Then he had to wait while Toby went past. Toby was taking more children to the seaside. They were having a wonderful time. "Everyone gets to take the children except me," moaned Thomas. At last the signalman changed the points. Thomas reversed back onto the track. And soon he was on his way once again. When Thomas arrived at the chocolate factory, it was very late. "Hurry up!" cried Thomas. "If I'm quick, I might still get to take some children." The workmen loaded Thomas's trucks as fast as they could. They were soon filled with heaps of chocolatey cocoa powder. Thomas was ready to go. But the shunters hadn't released the brakes on the trucks. Thomas pulled as hard as he could, but the trucks wouldn't move. "I have to hurry," puffed Thomas. He heaved, he huffed, and he puffed, and at last the coupling broke. Thomas shot forward. Cocoa powder flew everywhere. "Now I'll never get to take the children," puffed Thomas. After a long time, Thomas's trucks were ready. The yard manager had released the brakes, and Thomas chuffed carefully out of the yard. Finally, the track turned left past the old church. Thomas arrived at the ice cream factory. He thought his job was nearly done, but he was wrong. The factory manager was waiting for him. "The ice cream will soon be ready," he said. "You must take it to the seaside for me." Thomas was very disappointed. He wished he could take the children to the seaside instead. He wanted to hear them cheer when they saw the sea. Thomas puffed along the coast to the seaside. "I wish I was taking the children," sighed Thomas. Percy was waiting at the seaside station, and so were lots of children. They all cheered as Thomas pulled into the station. Thomas was surprised. "Why are all the children cheering?" puffed Thomas. "They're cheering for you," laughed Percy. "They've been waiting for the ice cream." The children were delighted to see Thomas and delighted to eat the ice cream. Thomas loved seeing the children laugh and cheer. The Fat Controller was waiting with the children. "Today you have worked extra hard," said the Fat Controller. "You are a really useful engine." "Delivering ice cream is a fun job after all," puffed Thomas. He was very happy. All the Fat Controller's engines liked to look clean, bright and shiny. They loved being washed down and having their brass polished until it gleams. James was in the workshop being repainted. He was beside himself with joy. James thought being repainted meant he was special. The workmen painted and polished for hour upon hour. Then with new paint shining, brass twinkling and blacking blacked, James returned to Tidmouth's sheds. "Aren't I a beautiful red?" he asked the others. "No wonder the Fat Controller thinks I'm special." But Percy was worried. He wasn't being repainted, and he wasn't red. "Does this mean the Fat Controller doesn't think I'm special?" he asked. "Looking splendid is not the same as being really useful," said Thomas firmly. "But best of all is being really useful and looking splendid, like me," said James cheerfully. Before Thomas could say anything else, James closed his eyes and fell happily asleep. The next morning, all the engines were very busy. Percy was working at the coal plant. Thomas and Emily were taking passengers up and down the branch lines. Gordon was pulling the express. The Fat Controller came to see James. He told him to join Percy at the coal plant at once. "The coal trucks must reach Brendam docks before the boat sails, so no dilly-dallying," he said. "Yes, sir," said James, and he set off at once. But James didn't go straight to the coal plant. He decided to go by the canal instead. Then he could see himself in the water for yard after yard after yard.
Magnificent,
he puffed. James had forgotten what the Fat Controller had said. At the coal yard, Percy was working as hard as he could, but he was falling behind. The line of trucks was getting longer and longer, and the yard manager was getting crosser and crosser. Where could James be? James was still enjoying himself, but there was no one around to share his fun, so he headed for Wellsworth Station. But as James pulled into Wellsworth Station, Gordon and the express were pulling out. The passengers had gone.
bother,
said James. He was disappointed and he left the station. James headed straight for the branch lines. James saw Thomas.
look at me,
He puffed.
don't I look fine?
You should be at work, called Thomas. But James didn't listen to Thomas. James was enjoying being James. Percy wasn't enjoying being Percy. He was trying his hardest, but the trucks were being very naughty. Poor Percy was almost worn out. "What will happen to the order now?" cried the yard manager. When James rolled into the coal mines, it was late in the afternoon. Percy was cross. So was the yard manager. "To make up for lost time," he said, "you must take an extra long line of trucks to the docks." James was delighted. The docks were always bustling with engines and people.
It's the place to be seen,
he said. "The trucks are being very naughty," warned Percy, but James wasn't listening. James puffed along, looking forward to being seen, but the trucks were naughtier than ever. They rocked and rolled and crashed and bashed. James's face was soon covered in soot. Going downhill, the trucks wiggled and giggled. James had to put his brakes on with a jolt. Coal tumbled out of the trucks, landing on James. James was cross and biffed the trucks as hard as he could. More coal flew out. Now James didn't want to be seen. He was as dirty as he had ever been. But on his way to the docks, he kept passing his friends. He passed Emily and Edward and Thomas. Thomas thought the only red thing left on James was his face. James trundled into Brendam Docks. He hoped no one would see him. But Gordon was at the docks with the express. He could not believe his eyes. He thought James was the grubbiest, grimiest, dustiest, dirtiest engine he had ever seen. Percy arrived safely with the last of the trucks.
I like your new coat of paint,
He puffed cheekily.
you do look splendid.
James knew he should have listened. He didn't feel splendid anymore. But for the first time all day, James could hear clearly. He could hear the sound of the trucks giggling at him. And despite feeling foolish, even James had to smile. It was a busy, bustling day on the island of Sodor. All
over the island, steam engines and diesel engines were happily working together. The Fat Controller came to see Thomas. "The quarry has an important order to fill," said the Fat Controller. "I need an engine that is both useful and reliable." "I won't let you down, sir," whistled Thomas proudly. But when Thomas arrived at the quarry, he had a nasty surprise. "Oh, it's you," oiled Diesel. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to help Mavis," puffed Thomas proudly. "Steamies can't help, not like a diesel," he sniffed. "That's not true," said Thomas crossly, and he began working at once. But Diesel was soon up to his old tricks. First, he shunted Thomas under the hopper. "Cinders and ashes," spluttered Thomas. Then, when Thomas let off steam, Diesel sniffed loudly. "What's that horrible smell?" he cried. "Oh, it's just a stinky old steam engine." "How rude!" exclaimed Thomas. "No wonder the Fat Controller is thinking of scrapping steamies." "I don't believe you," huffed Thomas. But he was upset. That night, Thomas stayed at the quarry, but he couldn't sleep. "What if Diesel is right?" Thomas said sadly. "What if the Fat Controller scraps all of us?" Thomas was worried. The next day, Salty had arrived. "Ahoy there, me hearties! Fresh diesel from the mainland." After he had been refueled, Diesel's engines started to rev faster and faster. "Aha!" he chuckled. "This new fuel makes my axles tingle." "Coal doesn't make my axles tingle," sighed Thomas. "I wish I could have fresh fuel." Even Mavis was excited by the new fuel. "Oh my," she said. Thomas was feeling left out. Soon Diesel was showing off. "I'm the fastest engine in the world," he boasted. "Look at me go." Suddenly, Diesel's engine coughed. Then it started to splutter. Black, smelly smoke billowed from his exhaust. "I feel sick," wailed Diesel. Mavis started billowing smoke too. "So do I," she groaned. The quarry manager was upset. "It's the new fuel," he cried. "Water must have leaked into the tanks." Soon, all the other diesels had broken down. Harry, Bert, even Salty had ground to a halt. So the Fat Controller telephoned the quarry manager. And the quarry manager came to see Thomas. "You are to collect fresh diesel from the fuel depot." "Right away, sir," whistled Thomas. And he steamed out of the quarry as fast as he could. At last he arrived at the fuel depot. "Give me all the clean fuel you've got," Thomas cried. "This is an emergency." "We'll soon have you loaded," said the workman. Thomas was soon loaded with trucks carrying fuel drums. The fuel drums were very heavy. Thomas pushed with all his might. His pistons creaked and his wheels squeaked. He kept on puffing. Thomas trundled all over the island with fresh fuel for everybody. For Salty, for Harry,
and for Bert. Thomas was feeling very tired, but he still had one more delivery to make. At the quarry, all work had stopped. Diesel was as green as a leaf. Mavis was feeling very glum. Then they heard a wonderful noise. It was Thomas. He steamed into the quarry with one final puff. "I made it," he cried. Mavis and Diesel had all the bad fuel drained out of their engines and all the good clean fuel poured in. "Marvellous," sighed Diesel. "Thank you, Thomas," purred Mavis. Soon the quarry was clattering with the sound of work. And finally, the important job was done. The Fat Controller arrived on board Percy. "Well done, Thomas," boomed the Fat Controller. "You have saved the day. You are a really useful engine and a credit to the railway." "Thank you, sir," puffed Thomas proudly. And even Diesel had to admit that Thomas is a very special engine, even if he is a steamy.